Hey friend, Chris here from MyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Today I want to show you how to create and customize your own ultimate software instrument for your projects that you can perform or record with. And what I mean by this is, let's assume that you've loaded several software instruments into a project and you want to perform or record with these instruments not one at a time, but as a single instrument or a stack of instruments. And you can do this very easily already in Logic. I'll show you how. But beyond that, maybe you want to further customize the individual tracks that you're recording with, such as maybe you want to set a key range for different tracks within your stack. Maybe you want the piano, for example, to cover only the lower half of the keyboard, while the synth covers only the upper half, so you can play both the piano and synth simultaneously. Or maybe you want to set a range or a limit in terms of velocity, so that certain instruments are playing, within a quieter range or a louder range. Maybe you want to transpose one track in the stack above or below the other tracks. And so much more beyond that, such as processing with audio effects, the entire stack individually, so on and so forth. So let's dig into it right now. All right, we're going to take a quick listen to a basic riff I've put together for this video. Let's take a quick listen and then we'll start to construct our stack of instruments. Here we go. All right, so again, a basic riff, but I'm digging this riff and I want to expand upon it. However, when we get into the second half of this riff, when the drums and bass and everything comes in, I feel like there's just still too much space. There's not a lift from the first part into the second part, enough that feels good to me. I'm going to open the library just in case anyone's wondering. I'm using only Logic instruments and patches. And down at the bottom here, just about, we have the Pop Producer keys, which comes with a keyboard collection in Logic Pro. Additionally, I have 2 instances of the electronic drum kit, as well as a lo-fi synth supplied by Alchemy, and then also a vocal shout preset from Sampler. As well, we have 3 synth tracks at the top, which are Alchemy patches with a lo-fi synth, a lone preset, as well as a 70s analog sequencer preset. I'll be performing these 3 different synths simultaneously using Logic Remote on my iPad. So we take a listen. Then the Alone preset, and the 70s analog sequencer. And you may be noticing that even though I'm working my way down the track list, the lo-fi synth is still in the mix for performing with. And that's because I've record enabled the lo-fi synth specifically, so it's available for us to perform and record with regardless of the fact that we've changed the focus to a different software instrument in our project. And this is how we're going to perform and record all 3 of these synths simultaneously. So if we open the mixer, you can see a signal for all 3. And if we open the track inspector in the left-hand side here, inside the inspector, labeled track inspector, we can see that the MIDI in port is set to its default, which is all. So our software instruments will accept any incoming MIDI data from any controller that's connected to our Mac. So I can be using 2 different controllers performing at the same time to all 3 instruments because this is set to all. However, we could specify that we only want the internal and remote controllers to be performing to this particular track, the 70s analog sequencer, or my launch pad or my launch key if it were connected. So you could actually specify specific controllers for specific software instrument tracks to perform to. I'll leave the MIDI import set to all, and I'm going to perform using Logic Remote, basically the exact same performance of the Pop Producer keys, just to demonstrate that you can record to 3 software instrument tracks simultaneously. Cool, so we got our performance in there. We've recorded to all 3 tracks simultaneously, and this can be really helpful to record exactly like this. However, as we move forward through this video, I want to be able to fine-tune different aspects of the different tracks. So I'm actually going to eliminate my performance, select all 3 synth tracks using either Command and clicking on the track headers, or holding Shift and clicking the first track header that I want to include and the last one. And from here, we're going to use key command Shift Command D to open the track stacks dialog. Now we have two options for creating a track stack. There's a folder stack, which is basically a VCA fader, allowing you to adjust the relative volume of the different tracks within the folder stack. Or we can use a summing stack, which allows you to apply processing to all three instruments simultaneously. And I just about always use summing stacks. Let's click create. And now our stack here, which we'll call Dreamy, can now be used for further processing the entire stack. We can apply EQ or compression if we wanted. Or we can also record directly to the track stack, which is pretty interesting. You can't record directly to a track stack that includes audio tracks, but you can for software instrument tracks. So let's do that right now. And as you can see, we're performing all three instruments within the stack simultaneously while recording to only one track lane, which is the summing track stack lane. From here, I'm going to solo this track stack so we can listen to just the synths without all the other instrumentation. I'm feeling pretty good about this performance, but I want to fine tune it. Let's take a quick listen to just a couple notes. All right, a pretty good start. One thing I'm thinking is that the 70s analog sequencer, I feel like it could be an octave or two above the other two synths. So to do this, we can select the 70s analog sequencer and go into the track inspector within the inspector. And right here, we can adjust the transposition of just this track. So we can boost this or decrease it. I'm going to set this maybe an octave above. This is based on semitones, so you're moving it up 12 semitones, which is an octave. Take a listen. That's pretty handy. Now we can perform this entire instrument stack as a single instrument, but offset the root note of this particular track within the stack. After that, I want to make some adjustments to this alone preset. And if we open the piano roll, we can see that most of the performance lives in the C4 to B4 range. And then the top end of this performance starts at about B4 and above. So perhaps I want this alone preset to perform only the lower chords, but not the higher ones. To do this, we select the alone track lane. And right here, again, under the track inspector, we can specify a key limit. Basically, we can say, hey, perform only the notes within a certain range and leave out any notes outside of that range. In this case, I'll set the key limit for the alone preset to that of C4 to maybe A4. And I'm just typing in the letters and numbers of the scale that I want to work within. Now let's take a listen to just the alone preset now. Or we could set it higher, so maybe B4 to G8. Pretty awesome. So again, you could specify that the lo-fi synth only plays the lower end of the spectrum, while maybe the analog sequencer plays only the higher end. But in the case of the alone preset, let's once again set this to C4 to A4. All right, let's take a listen to this stack as is. I'm feeling pretty good, but I feel like that analog sequencer still is, I want it to be dreamy, but I don't want it to be poking out as much above the other two synths. Now, of course, we could play with the levels here. That's one way of going about it. But we can also limit the range of velocities for the individual tracks within the stack. Now, you might be looking over here at the velocity limit and thinking, oh, okay, that would be a way to limit the velocity. But like the key limit, the velocity limit in the track inspector just tells Logic, hey, any notes that play above or below the velocity range we've set, just don't play them at all. And I don't want to do that. I just want to limit the range at which the performance works within. So just to illustrate, if we take a look again at the piano roll, we can see that everything is pretty much just played at a constant high velocity. If we look at Logic Remote in the settings, you can see right here in the velocity range halfway down, I've specified as I touch the keys to perform at a high velocity. We can adjust this range as we see fit using the sliders. So everything's working at a high velocity, but maybe I want one of these tracks to perform at a lower velocity. In that case, let's close the track inspector, select our analog sequencer, and load a MIDI effect, the velocity processor. What's cool about the velocity processor is we can set the mode to various options, but we can choose value or range, which gives us the option to limit the performance in terms of velocity of these tracks. So if we select our sequencer, and let's just solo that, if we turn this off and take a listen, but when we turn on the velocity processor, we can set this value to as quiet or loud as we want, and all notes will conform. Which obviously is really helpful for quickly fine-tuning a performance to a particular velocity, but perhaps you don't want your software instruments to be nailed to just one particular velocity value, but a range of values. In that case, let's choose range, and we can actually adjust these sliders to a minimum and maximum. So we could say, hey, I want to work within just this range of performance, and we could set it to anywhere we want. And this can be further illustrated if we select all the notes in this performance and go to Functions, go to MIDI Transform, and let's set a random velocity to that of anywhere between 1 and 127 and operate. And now our performance is quite varied in terms of its velocity. We'll be able to hear certain notes are quieter than others and some are way louder than others. With a performance like this that is overly dynamic, we can use the velocity processor to rein in those dynamics to a particular range. Really, really helpful. I'm going to go back a few undo steps just to get our performance back to where it was. And at this point, I want to be able to process this entire instrument group as one. And that's why we chose a summing stack when we created a track stack for our 3 Alchemy tracks. So at this point, let's take a listen to this performance with everything else. Okay, pretty good, but I want to process these together so they're a little less in your face. And what I'm going to use is the Step Effects plugin. I've loaded a preset, the Chrome Zipper, and I've adjusted it to my taste. But instead of processing each individual track separately, we're going to load this right onto the track stack. And because we chose a summing stack, we have this option to load audio effects that will process all 3 tracks together. So now if we take a listen to the stack, once again, with everything in context. Cool, so we're adding just a little more stereo action, just a little dreaminess in the background. But of course, maybe we want to dig in even further and fine-tune the processing on specific tracks within the stack, but not just one track at a time, but multiple tracks at a time. And of course, because of the 10.7.5 update a few weeks ago, we can do exactly that by creating a summing track stack within a summing track stack. I'll select these bottom 2 Alchemy tracks and use the key command Shift-Command-G to create a summing track stack within this track stack. And now we can further process from here. Maybe I want to add a little overdrive using the distortion plugins. The overdrive plugin is helping prop up those two tracks together as a single track within our instrument stack, while at the same time reining in the dynamics of those two particular Alchemy presets because it's acting like a compressor or leveler. And just like that, we've been able to really fine-tune our instrument stack that we're performing and recording with by specifying the key ranges, velocity, transposition, and even processing the different elements as a unit or the entire stack as a unit and performing all of them together. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, as always, I highly recommend subscribing to the channel, Wide Logic Per Rules, or subscribing on the website itself, widelogicperrules.com. Every week I'm posting new videos, emails, or posts to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Thanks so much.